Even as India and the United States remain locked in tough negotiations over trade, market access and even tariff structures, US President Donald Trump has once again praised Prime Minister Modi, calling him a fantastic man and a close personal friend. Speaking exclusively to money control on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump struck an upbeat note on bilateral ties between India and the US after his address to global leaders and business executives, expressing confidence that the two countries would clinch a trade agreement. He in fact said that I have great respect for your Prime Minister. He's a fantastic man and a friend of mine. We are going to have a good deal. A day after those remarks, Union Minister from India, Ashwini Vaishnav, had said that Donald Trump's comments were encouraging, even reflected India's strong engagement in global trade. But even as the tone remains warm, India has also drawn a clear red line. At Davos, New Delhi pushed back against Trump's proposed single trade order, making it clear that global trade cannot be dictated through one-size-fits-all executive decisions. From calling India a dead economy to pushing unilateral trade frameworks, Trump's approach reflects an older world order, one that is now being challenged. But here's the larger question. Can a waning West still label a rising East? Asia now drives over half of global growth. India is expanding at 6 to 7%. Europe struggles to touch even 1%. So growth has shifted east. Why so? Because Asia is contributing 50% of global GDP growth. Europe is averaging just 1% growth. If you do this data crunching, the demographics are also diverging. You learn that workforce is shrinking in the West versus an expanding median age in the East. And that in EU stands at 44 and in India at a very youthful 28 years. Debt burden is now tilting towards the West because the US debt is standing at 120% plus of their own GDP. The EU debt is standing at 90% plus of their GDP. Institutionals are lagging reality because the West is holding 55% IMF voting power, but the share of global GDP is below 40%. The capital votes with feet because India is among the top FDI destinations. Supply chains are moving east and south as well. And then there's Trump's America. Growth is slowing down. The US GDP growth is averaging just at a 2%, whereas India's is growing at a rapid 6 to 7%. Debt is unsustainable for the United States. Their national debt is standing at 120% of their GDP, whereas India's debt is standing at 70% of their GDP. Trade and supply chains are also shifting because US share of global manufacturing is declining by 17%. There's a decrease in the global influence as well. The US-led institutions claim authority, but emerging markets in the East, whether it's India, China, are all driving growth, investment, even tech adoption. The message from Davos is firm but measured. Partnerships must be negotiated, not imposed. Because in a multipolar world, India is no longer going to be dictated rules.
So our engagement with the US is very consistent. Every point which needs to be discussed is being discussed under the leadership of our Cabinet Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, and External Affairs Minister and Finance Minister. And as well as there is I think there is very good understanding between the two countries, and it's just it wouldn't be proper for me to kind of speculate on when the deal will actually happen, but the engagement is very good.
And right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. One that would create a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. And crucially, that would provide a first-mover advantage for Europe with one of the world's fastest growing and most dynamic continents.
Anna Kuban, thank you so much for joining in. My first question, the US president has pushed for US control of Greenland. He even criticized Europe and laid out his own foreign policy priorities. Could you please share the key takeaways of Donald Trump's speech at Davos?
Well, really the big takeaway was the fact that Trump said that he wasn't going to take Greenland by military force. That had been the major concern, and we saw markets respond to that very positively. And then a few hours later, we then got word, or he announced that he had come to some sort of framework deal with NATO on Greenland, the details of which we're not yet sure about. That was the main takeaway. And then second to that, Trump really went on a winding speech listing multiple grievances, many against European countries, which he said were taking advantage of the United States, an allusion to those trade deficits that Trump has always criticised. And then also he levelled some pretty ominous statements, a thinly veiled threat as well against Canada. He said that Canada lives because of the United States and that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, should remember that. He also speculated about whether the United States would come to NATO's defence if one of the members was attacked, and that of course is one of the founding principles of that alliance. So yes, a very long, very winding speech, but the biggest takeaway was the fact that he said that he's not going to take Greenland by military force.
Anna, after a talk with NATO, President Trump has announced that the US is exploring a potential deal on Greenland as he dropped planned tariffs on the 8 European countries. He's also ruled out using force to take over the island, as you rightly highlighted. Is EU now heaving a sigh of relief? What more can you tell us?
They really are, but some of the specifics of this situation, they remain in place. So yesterday we saw EU lawmakers agree to block the rubber stamping of the EU-US trade deal, which was forged last year through blood, sweat and tears. That is now on ice, and it's not quite sure that, even though these tariff threats have been dropped, what's going to happen to that? We also saw in the run-up to that, to Trump backing down, the EU really coming out quite forcefully and being very prepared to retaliate with their own trade measures. For one instance, they've got this anti-coercion instrument, which is a very wide-ranging piece of legislation which allows them to effectively kind of do what they want. They could impose export controls or new tariffs or prevent American companies from accessing investment opportunities in Europe. The opportunities were pretty endless there. But then also, I think it's quite clear that Europe is waking up to the fact that they're going to have to really go it alone without the US as a reliable partner anyway. We saw Ursula von der Leyen, the chief of the EU Commission, open her speech at Davos with the statement that Europe needs to be independent. So yes, we're seeing huge relief in Europe, but the path is not yet particularly certain, and there's still a lot of uneasiness about the future of the transatlantic relationship.